I am pleased to be able to introduce our keynote speaker to all of you, particularly you graduates today. This is your commencement speaker. There will never be another one. This is the one. Born to a Navy fighter pilot and first-grade school teacher, Matt George's vocations have included international photojournalist, writer, U.S. Navy Special Forces, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, and internationally top-ranked professional surfer. How's that for variety? On December 26, 2004, when the great Indian Ocean tsunami struck, Matt George launched an aid effort that was to become the model of the humanitarian work he continues today. In this year-long humanitarian effort, Matt George implemented the first early warning system plans and held the first test of Asian tsunami evacuations in the history of Indonesia, with over 40,000 people participating. So successful was his effort that the Indonesian president flew to Padang to meet with Mr. George and discuss the future of disaster preparedness.
What's unique about this class is that the students are graded on two criteria. One, participation and guts. And two, they have to produce a full-length feature magazine article that we get published in the international media.
I'm really going to stress the discipline of writing a travel story. There's a template. It's to get the reader to feel, but more importantly, it's to get the reader to see.
In addition to their academic work, the students also participated in relief work, delivering much-needed school supplies to remote island villages, many of the local people having seen few, if any, foreign visitors.
This is a little tougher entry here. The bridge has been broken down since the last time we were there. In the black water that you're going to be walking across, you want to keep it away from your feet as much as possible. There's hookworms, leeches, bloodworms. You're going to want to watch that. So be very, very careful walking across this little bridge.
We specialize in delivering school supplies. It's low impact and high result, and non-culturally disruptive way to really, really contribute.
You know, it took the biggest wave in the world to turn me into what I am today. This was a wave that took 750,000 lives, and it was my epiphany. It taught me what I have the privilege to share with you today. So I'd ask you to listen closely, but not listen closely to me. Listen very closely to your own hearts, and seek to unlock what you truly have to offer this world, or you will drown in what you do not have to offer.
Are we achieving great things by helping a little boy that has the beginnings of leprosy, or are we changing the world? Well, yeah. One person at a time.
What an absolute honor and privilege it is to meet with, I'm going to say it, an old legend of the sport, of surfing, of the pastime, not the pastime, of the art and the beauty of surfing that we all enjoy.
Oh, thanks. It really means a lot for me to be here. I think that in this age of communication, I think it's really important not to take walks down memory lane, but to establish what our trip is now, because all this, you can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. So this is not nostalgia to me. This is as modern communication as an Instagram or as the modern internet or online. I think it's a really important time for the surfing community globally to start talking to each other and to really figure out where we're at, because of the almost the demonization of surfing that's been the words and the feelings that have been reduced down to Instagram emojis, when I know that modern surfers now are feeling as much as anyone has ever felt in the history of surfing, coming out of that barrel, getting a great ride, that need to get a wave. I think communication now it's really the time to expand it again. There's so much talk about, the loss of soul and who's taking care of our, who's taking care of the soul of surfing, and is the WSL and the internet and online, are they murdering the deep soul? I don't think that's true at all. I believe that surfers are feeling it as powerfully and as intelligently as they ever have. It's just that the outlet has changed to where now the communication is, three little on fire emojis or something, where it's time to start talking again. It's time to get stoked again. It's time to lay down what we're all feeling, which has always made the surfing community so special, and what has made it so much more than just a lunatic fringe.
Very interesting opener there, and food for thought, because I think you're right. We are now faced with a crossroads of, we've all got used to the digital era and we're all au fait with it. It's how we navigate and how we marry the beauty and the art and the capturing of surfing in writing and copy and good copy and narratives, along with good visuals and energy of surfing itself. How do we make stronger connections through, as you say, through the written word as opposed to just emojis?
Yes.
How do we do that?
Well, it's pretty easy as far as I'm concerned. I was recently just talking with Griffin Colapinto, and he has come across with his presentation of his social media as he's come across as a reader and a meditator and a thinker and all that sort of thing. And we sat down and talked about it, and I said, well, are you writing anything? And he goes, well, I'm journaling a little bit. I'm like, okay, that's good. That's a good start. Um, but I was a little dismayed because it seems as if it's all coming at him. It's all about gathering. It's all about visual, seeing what you're discovering online. And I asked him, what's coming from you? Like, what are you putting out there? What are your feelings? And, because and he asked me why I asked. And I said, well, it's real simple. I go, with the internet now all defining us and telling us, giving us advice on everything from romance to finances to future. Here's how you do it. Influencer, even that word. When the fact of the matter is, we don't really need to listen to that much. What we need is each other. We need to listen to each other. And that is how we have this global surfing id, rather than just collecting information from other sources and reprocessing it in a shallow way. It's really time to think deeply about this act that is so important to each one of our lives. I do not believe that surfing is a pastime. I think that it's a philosophical entity that we enter into, and it's in many ways this guiding light. And there's something out there that we all find, from beginner to experienced surfer, and there's something to be found on the face of a wave. And surely there's something very important to be found inside a spinning vortex, like being inside the tube of a wave. There's something very deep happening there. And I think that it's, as I said earlier, it's time for all of us to examine this and talk about it again.
When you say again, we're now referring to a time gone by when it was much more of a topic and spoken about. Is that because we were able to sit around a campfire more often than not?
Well, our campfire was basically Surfer Magazine.
There you go.
There it is. That was our campfire. And I mean, the defining power of that print magazine, and being able to, having been the senior contributing editor there for many years, being able to almost be a benign dictatorship. You know what I mean? To be able to get to see the global surfing world and know that you'd send it out there in a monthly package, and people would devour it, not so much as propaganda, but as a home, as a touchstone. And it was very, very important that those words that were written and those images that we saw were in synchronicity with this beautiful thing called surfing. The other thing, too, was the tactile nature of it. That magazine was yours. You held it in your hand. You subscribed to it. It was yours. And then also seeing these great photographs that are not video. Think about that. To be able to capture these moments, single moments, that will never happen again, in one big giant double page spread, and you look at all the nuance and the posture of these surfers and the postures of yourself, how the ocean makes you look and feel. I think that these were really important totems to carry with us now. And I'm not going to run down the internet. We live in a modern age, but now with just, you know, the clips and the videos and the, you know, the pump and a jump and the, you know, the quick, just all this video coming at us. It's so important with the written word and photographs to stop for a second and look and see the nuance of it all. Rather, it's almost like the difference between, you know, gulping a goblet of wine and savoring it. So I think that's something that's really important, and that's what the written word is very much about, expressing ourselves in the written word, which is certainly something I've done during my career. Hence this book that I believe needed to be done. It was time. And I was very, very pleased when a publisher came to me. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. I didn't want to self-publish. And a publisher came to me and said, look, you've got this library of it's almost a time capsule of these stories that took place over 35 years. How do you feel about putting them into a compendium? How do you feel about putting them into an omnibus, so to speak? I said, oh, you're exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. You know,
Please take the
yeah,
story.
please,
Mine.
and let's do this. You know, and so I'm very proud of the book In Deep.
I'm holding a copy of it right now.
And
Fortunately, it's one of the only copies here in Bali, so I'm not going to
that's true.
sit at home and read.
But it's real easy to get, Amazon or DAP Publishing. But I think what's interesting about it was that since we're sitting in Bali, this photo was taken in 1984. That's my brother, and that's me at Nusa Lembongan, one of the islands right offshore here. And back then, you had to take a little prahu like that to get there. And what was so interesting about it, and that was a pretty hairy crossing, let me tell you. But what was interesting about it is that we paid for it by delivering the first refrigerator to Nusa Lembongan.
The very first refrigerator reached Nusa Lembongan in 1984.
Oh, yes.
Another interesting fact, television only reached South Africa in 1975.
There it is.
Now, was shipwrecks there when you...
We were right in the channel at Shipwrecks when this was shot by Bernie Baker, the photographer. And this is our first look at it. And there was that such excitement of you know, you've traveled all these long miles, and back then, yes, it was a little more difficult to travel. And finally, how surfers would gather and find just the corner of the reef about the size of your front lawn if you have a nice house. And yet we'd come from all over the world just to get to that front lawn, that little spot where that wave would come in and do its thing. And so I still believe in that discovery, and I believe that telling our stories are what lead to the joy of that discovery. You know, I've always, you know, surfers are such great storytellers because what we do is so extraordinary. You know, we travel these great distances and these trackless miles just to get to this little corner, whether it's a spot that's spread out like Uluwatu, or a dynamic place like Padang Padang, or a nice little corner like Bingen, you know, like, but we do it. So the storytelling is essential to the global community to keep our identity and to put importance to what we're doing. Like we're not just screwing around. I mean, we're actually seeking physicality, we're seeking philosophy, we're seeking guidance, we're seeking answers, and so that's why I believe in this book, what's essential about it is all these stories are not nostalgia. It's a collection of all my greatest published works. It sounds pretty egotistical, but it's the truth. And in a very readable way. You don't start at the beginning and go to the end. There are many different chapters, many different feelings.
Short stories.
They're short stories.
Yeah.
And they're photographs captured of great personalities. Like it's not a bunch of essays about how beautiful surfing is. It's about people. It's about places. It's about all these things that have made us what we are, that have made even a 13-year-old surfer today, these stories are in many ways the background of what has created what we are now. And so I think I got to say it out loud. I think it's a very important book, for surfers to read. I believe if you read this book, and I sound like I'm trying to sell you insurance, but if you actually read this book, I believe you're going to be a better surfer on the face of a wave.
Can you give us an excerpt? Can you give us one of the stories? Give us a synopsis, so that a little bit of a taster.
Sure, I'd be more than happy to. What's interesting about this too is I've also been a strong proponent of female surfing long before it was in vogue, before Roxy, before all that. And the stories in this book do cover from like mid-'80s to 2024. So you're not just buying some book of a bunch of old stories about a bunch of old guys back in the day. It's not that kind of book. There's third person stories in this. There's creative short stories. There's fiction. There's all these different things that come together. I think one of the great, well, of course, you've got my relationship with Kelly Slater, which has been very unique.
Who has written the foreword to the book?
Yes, by the way, yeah, Kelly did write the foreword. And our relationship has been one of peerdom. It's not a journalist sitting at the, hey, give us a quote, Kelly. Kelly and I have always been able to see right through each other. And he is so much deeper than this 11-time world champion. There's so much to this guy. And I have both exposed that and protected it as well. Probably the most professional relationship I've had in my entire life with a professional surfer would be myself and Kelly, covering his story from since he was 17 years old when I first did the first story with him, all the way to this year when I spent some time with him in Western Australia. And I think that it's that seeing that timeline of that incredible career and everything that went around that. It just covers this incredible era of high performance surfboards, design, philosophy, thought, achievement, the evolution of surfing contests, where we're at today. You can just see it in these pages as you turn the pages with these different stories. As I said, also, I've always been a very strong proponent of female surfing. There's a story in here that is extraordinary, I believe, about a very personal moment I had with Lane Beachley. Incredible hardship, almost brutal hardship to become a 7-time world champion, particularly towards that, going up against that era of misogynist surfing, the way that the women were considered lesser and what she went through and her perseverance and strength is a story of a hero for the ages. And so the stories in this book are not just some old guys. I remember back when we used paraffin wax and no. All the stories in this lead to one big us, very human stories. I think one of the stories that startled people was I did the definitive story about Bethany Hamilton's shark attack. I think all surfers can relate to shark attacks because it's part of our world. I mean, what other sport can you get eaten by a dinosaur? I mean, that's it. I mean, snowboarding, I guess, I don't know if a snow leopard, ran out onto the course and ate someone in the half pipe, that'd be about what it's like.
Correct.
So when I started her story, and I started it as from the perspective of the shark itself, and then the very personal moment at the very end, which I'll read to you, where you'll get an idea of where these stories go. Let's take up the story right after Tom Hamilton, her father, picks her up, and it's the first time he's going to be able to take her home after the attack. Okay, so he's on his way home. On the drive home, it rains. With a sleeping Bethany next to him in the car, with the windshield wipers beating time, Tom Hamilton begins to hum a tune. He has not thought of this tune for a long, long time, not since he was in the U.S. Navy as a young gunner's mate. His lips move slightly as he recalls the words of the official Navy hymn. Eternal Father strong to save, whose arm does bind the restless wave, who biddest the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. Oh, hear us when we cry to thee for those in peril on the sea. Driving on through the rain, these are the only words Tom Hamilton can remember, and he reaches out to gently take his daughter's hand, but it is no longer there. So these very, very personal moments that have been described to me, that have been shared with me, are the same kind of personal stories that all us surfers have, that we tell each other, whether it's a joyful, you wouldn't believe this session we just had, oh my God, or, oh, we found a secret spot, oh, I just got back from Indonesia, this whole thing. These stories should be told and should be written down, or they'll be lost forever.
Wow, that was that was a powerful words right there.
Well, especially as a father like you, and you can imagine that moment. And so this is not a memoir about, hey, look at me, I've been surfing for 40, 50 years. It's not that. It's these incredible moments of our world, which are as extraordinary as any world, as any world, any activity, like, I don't know, is basketball more important because it makes more money? Is football more important? Is it more extraordinary? I think the surfing world is more extraordinary than these sports because of where we find ourselves, our desperate travel, our vows of poverty, our incredible fortunes that have been made, by these CEOs and the Gabriel Medinas and the Mick Fannings of the world, this incredible world that is all comes down to this passion of riding on the face of a wave. I don't know another world that shares that
Energy.
that incredible energy. I just don't.
So, can we talk about your connection to Bali and Indonesia at large?
Sure.
And how long that this love affair has been going on?
I think that I first came here in 1984, and it really put the zap on my head. The culture was so colorful and seemed to fit. And as you know, I was lucky enough, a lot of us were lucky enough to have Bali like a DNA helix, that we were able to visit almost annually or every 3 years or something. You had to come back here. There was something here for us, not only these extraordinary waves, okay, that are the image of perfection, that any, perfect wave pool has been modeled after, okay? They're here, and they're here in abundance. So there's that. Then there's this incredible culture and the incredible color, and it puts the zap on you, man, especially when you are a dedicated world traveler who is seeking these moments and seeking these cultures in so many different places on the globe. This one hit me very, very strong, as a recovering Catholic, I guess, being raised as a kid, Roman Catholic Church. I mean, the whole spiritualism, this open spiritualism, and the way that it was able to mesh with the spirituality of surfing, just made perfect sense. So I eventually got to the point where I lived here permanently, and I will say, with all the changes that have happened here, that vibe from 1984 is still here for me. Yes, there's been development. Yes, they're tearing cliffs down. Yes, they're putting up hotels. Canggu's crowded. Yes, yes, yes. That's all fine and dandy, man. But all you got to do is stand at the Uluwatu Cliff anywhere and stare out at that Indian Ocean with these timeless waves coming in, and you'll feel behind you all the energy that has become the mythology of Indonesian surfing. It is still here. I still feel it. And I think if you take the time to connect, you will too.
Great answer. How would you compare your relationship with being around Indonesian surfers from all over Indonesia? We're not just talking about Bali here. I mean, this weekend we had the finals of the ASC.
Yes, sure.
And there we got to see, or I did firsthand, from Sumbawa, from Nias, for all these board riders from grassroots level, over 100 surfers coming together, Indonesian. What is your relationship, or what is your experience of having come from the West, essentially, your relationship with Western surfers and Indonesian surfers? How do the two compare?
Well, I'd like to start this answer with the incredible event of Jerry Lopez. Okay. All right. There were surfers here. Well, the first surfers here, really, the first modern surfers in the late 60s, late 70s, were airline attendants. They were Australian airline attendants. And what happened was, as you fly into the first flights that came here from Australia, as you fly into runway 090 there, due east, and you look out that right window, that's the Buka Peninsula, and all you see is these marching waves. And these flight attendants, male and female, would go back to Australia going, "You're not going to believe what you can see out the side of the starboard the starboard cabin." So some surfers started coming here, but the real transition to the Indonesian surfers was when Jerry Lopez showed up, and it's a very simple reason why. One, he looked like them. This is a slighter build, black hair, bowl cut, same color skin. And he paddled out and proved that a man that looked like them that could do it. And do it with incredible grace, okay? As you know, Bali is a dance culture. It tells most of its stories through ritual dance. And when they saw Jerry Lopez, a guy that looked like them, exactly like them, go out there and do this beautiful thing, they named surfing Baselan Char, he who dances upon the water, okay? So that's where that began. And that era of surfers, right before Rizal and those guys, also surfed with a dancing approach. They were very, very graceful surfers. And you can see a trace of it in the Indonesian surfers today. You can see that DNA that goes back to that grace, surfers that just won the recent contest. Made Winata Adiputra, otherwise known as Bull. This beautiful, graceful matador of a surfer, it can be traced all the way straight back to Pipeline and Jerry Lopez, So I think that my relationship was, when I came here, I was so overjoyed to see that the Indonesian surfers had their own way. They had their own way of surfing. It was a graceful, beautiful, almost respectful surfing. And they got it on these perfect waves. They got it, And so my relationship with it is that I believe from the very beginning that Indonesian surfers have influenced the Westerners that have come here far more than how we have influenced their surfing.
That's an interesting one. I was chatting to Tippy Jabrick, and he was telling me about Tubes, the bar, and where they would literally go to consume surf content,
Exactly.
whether it's a magazine or watching a surf video. He says, but the content that they were getting at the time was always 1 or 2 years behind,
Yes.
and so he said that also had an influence on their style of surfing. So they would surf in a slightly more old-fashioned way than the surfers that were actually
Sure, I get it.
surfing at the time. But now what you're saying, quite interestingly, is that they've carved out their own expression, their own creative way
Oh, yeah.
because of they've got an Indonesian way of expressing themselves in a way.
Yes,
And it's so prominent that you're saying it's influencing other surfers that come to Indo. Is that because it's specific to this wave, would you say?
I'd say it's specific to the wave and the culture, the fact that that dance culture thing, that grace, that approach. Have you noticed Indonesian surfers, they're not in a hurry. They complete their waves, and I'm talking about the generation of like Wanada Adiputra, Bowl,
Yes.
and then Rizal, and that sort of they finish their waves the same time the Western surfers do, but don't they seem to go about it a little more calmly, and and elegant lines, big lines, not in a hurry, not trying to just pump and do an air reverse. These waves that are theirs, that they own, believe me, and they see the big lines and the big swooping turns and the deep barrel rides and the graceful, dare I say, the graceful endings of these waves. The way that they even get out of a wave there's a calmness and a belonging to them that is different than the frantic, opportunistic Western style. Just I've got to do some crazy off the lip, and then I got to jack this and I got to jack that. And here comes an air section. I got to set it up. Oh my God! It's like no, it's this flowing. It's a dance culture influence,
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned, and I think that it does, particularly at long barrels like Padang, Desert Point, Uluwatu, and the outer islands. Western surfers come here and they'll see the locals, and I think they calm down too. I really do. So, about this being all the marketing that arrived, all the videos and the new movies and the new surf trunks and all this kind of stuff. The Balinese are very, very adept at adaptation, but they don't mimic. They're not mimics. They can adapt, but at the core of their experience will always be their family and philosophical belief culture. And you're not going to find that a lot in Western surfers.
And that's the spiritual connection right there.
Yes, with this island. This is why there's we have one top surfer finally from Indonesia, and dare I say, he's half Japanese. The other Indonesian surfers here are so connected to their cultures and their family here that why would you go anywhere else? Why would you want to put on a wetsuit in freezing cold water and try to qualify on some WQS contest when you live at Bingen, or you live at Uluwatu, or you live in the Mentawai? It's like, it's that connection. It's not laziness. It's not. And it's not a lack of curiosity. It is supreme contentedness. And that is what comes across to me with Indonesian surfers. They are content.
Isn't that what we all look for in life?
Which is it's one of the reasons why I live here. I am not desperately seeking things anymore, or trying to desperately get an empty wave and rip it to shreds. There's a grace to it all, and I think that's what you find here. Certainly reflected in this book. The stories I have here about Bali are very respectful. They're very deep, and I believe that they will give you a lot of perspective from the Indonesian perspective. It's why I published the magazine here, Surf Time Magazine.
Yes.
When I came here with a mission to publish a magazine, print magazine, that would not be told the way that Indonesian surfing has been in the print, because it has been told much the way as a visit to a prostitute, right? The Australian perspective of you show up, you party hard, you rape and pillage these waves, and then you go home and you write about it from that perspective. No. Surf Time magazine and a lot of stories in this book are told from the inside looking out, because this is a culture that is extraordinary in this. The British Empire, the Japanese Empire, the tourist empire, the Dutch Empire has thrown themselves at this little island, and yet the island has never, ever succumbed to those cultures, ever. And they don't even have a military. Now, tell me how they pulled that. And it's the same thing with the surfing. The Western surfers that have come here have never taken the surfing culture away from the Indonesian surfing people, ever. As a matter of fact, they're the ones making a lot of money off us.
And why wouldn't they?
Well, they've never been taken advantage of.
Well, there we go.
Once again, the culture has never been able to have been taken advantage of. And you can feel it to this day, and that's why I live here. You can walk down the street, and no matter the development, you can still see all the temples and hear the noises and smell the incense. I'm just like, man, keep it coming, guys, you know? The Western world will not beat this place.
No. And the island itself will have something to say about the time for the reset, if there is going to be one, you know.
Absolutely.
The time when, you know, and again, Tippy and I spoke about this, when that time comes, it'll be the end of a new era and the end of a wave, because people have been coming to this island in waves. You had the waves of the creatives, you know, coming here for art and creativity. And then you had the wave of the surfers, and then you had the wave of the people wanting to own a view of a rice field.
Yes.
And then the developers. But that is just another wave that this too shall pass.
I agree. And I hope that, well, I don't hope, I know that Bali will always survive to its better angels. It's saying, I don't know how else to put it, that it will always move towards that spirituality. I mean, take a look, the 2002 bombings. There's a real interesting story in this. One of the definitive stories in this book was a story I did about the 2002 bombings. And it was the most impressive thing of all was that after it happened, Bali didn't want revenge. They didn't want to go to a foreign country and start killing people like Americans like to do. They said, we did something wrong. We accept the blame. What did we do that we let this get out of control? What an extraordinary culture to say that.
Yeah.
Rather than to feel hatred and vengeance and to want to go kill people, they just said, hey, man, for this to happen here, this was our fault. And I just think that's a remarkable culture, you know, particularly when that night of 2002 has been the only terrorist attack in history perpetrated directly against surfers and surfers only. That was the Triangle, the Tubes, the Sari Club, the Bounty. It was all surfers that created that, and the surfing culture, and our greed and our lasciviousness and the Australian influence of the beer, booze, and broads, you know, and just this crazy things just escalated to the point where something had to break. And it did. And that was our fault. That was the surfers and the surfing culture. It was all our fault.
And yet the Balinese people took it on the chin.
They took it on the chin. Yes, they did. So I respect that very much, and that's how I coexist here with this culture, is with that kind of respect for that sort of response.
Would you say the Matt George of today is, how much of the young Matt George is there still in you?
Well, I believe a great deal, Steve. I believe a great deal, and I think that surfing keeps us young, and surfing gives us this, because it is play. We do play in the ocean, and we do have toys called surfboards. You can look at it in that perspective. It's just that the act that we're doing keeps you young and joyful. I've lost a lot of my naivete, of course, now that I've, reached these years. But I have not lost my wonder. I think that's the thing that happens to a lot of surfers. Let's just say married, kids, mortgage, and they start losing this wonder, the wonder of what we're doing out there. I think that's the most important thing that keeps you young. I think it keeps women in love with you. I think it keeps children in love with you as parents, is to be able to see that you still have wonder and that you're not tired and that you're still keen. And I believe that it's a very, very important aspect to a surfer's personality to hang on to garner the respect of your culture, your family, and anyone else that regards you.
Beautifully put. Because, I mean, I've had a look at some of your older stories when you were growing up as a younger man, and you were a raging bull back in the day. If there's no other way to describe it.
Yeah, I was a disruptor, as they would say today. I guess I was an influencer.
You coined the phrase influencer/disruptor.
Oh, yes.
Maverick, I think there's a few other words we can throw in the pot there, but it's great to be able to take all that experience and to, one would have to say that your exposure to living here in Bali and being around the very people that you've described as calm and spiritual have probably, it's played a big role in shaping your personality and counterbalancing that raging bull of Matt. And not to say that you haven't lost, you still got that fire in you.
Oh, no, I'm with you. No, I understand what you're saying.
It's just that we're able to sit and you're able to write a beautiful book, and you're able to capture all these stories that sure came with the personality that you were.
Sure.
And that's how you got these stories.
Yes.
And that's how you forged these relationships.
A very aggressive approach.
There we go. But I'm sure you'd give me a wave every now and then nowadays, but whereas probably 20 years ago you wouldn't have.
Sure.
That's what I'm getting at.
Sure, I would have been out there throwing elbows with the best of them. But rather than becoming a peacenik, I think it's this, okay? It's this. I would challenge any surfer from a 6-year-old that just got his first wave to an octogenarian. I would challenge every one of them to have never considered the cosmic connection of what we're doing out there in the ocean. That need to describe the wave, to write the poetry about it, to consider that what is this incredible feeling I'm feeling, which is very different than catching a football, very different than serving an ace. What is this deep emotional, almost religious ferocity that I feel for this addictive act? I would challenge any surfer to have not felt that. I just examined it. And that's why I spent my life furiously examining the act as it relates to the spiritual belonging of it inside our hearts. So that's why Bali, of course, with this incredible culture, which is the finest culture in the world that has been able to, or that maybe one of the only cultures in the world that has been able to take their spiritual culture on land and combine it with their spiritual belonging on the face of a wave. I remember times that I've been outraged at the GoPro product because are we supposed to see this cinematically? Being inside a tube looking out like Koa Smith's life-changing ride, in Namibia, where like a minute of spinning, because were we supposed to see that? Like it almost seems like that moment when we get in the barrel, whether it's for just a split second, if we're not that experienced, or if we're the greatest surfers in the world and we can, be in that barrel for a long time, are we supposed to see endless cinematic footage of that connection? It's so forensic. It's forensic, but is it actually numbing us to what an incredible place on earth that is to be? where all of a sudden the goal now isn't to be there. The goal now is to get the footage to show everybody else that you were there. So I don't know that I haven't formed that thought yet. I'm writing an essay on it now about, are we supposed to be able to see that? It's almost like, are we supposed to are we supposed to make porn videos of ourselves? Like, are we supposed to see that moment of supreme embrace with someone we love? Are we supposed to see that?
Yeah.
Or are we just supposed to experience it?
Yeah.
I know I sound like a lunatic.
No, what you're saying is you're describing a moment of intimacy
Yes.
and connection that lives with you for years and years and years, because it's like it's a core moment, a core memory.
Oh, yeah.
I can remember a barrel I had in the Maldives, my last wave in 1998.
And there it is. There it is,
It's
right
there. It's filed.
Yeah.
And it was an intimate moment, and that will live with me forever. So I completely get what you're saying. To unpack that thought and to unpack the reason why people would want to have others see what they're doing in the barrel.
And I don't want to break the spell. You know, there's a spell that happens when you take off on a wave. You're under a spell. You know, and I know I sound like some, you know, a lion can only last as long as his teeth. Okay, but here's the thing. Hang on. Okay,
Stick with them.
That moment of, I don't know, you drop in now, you've got this thing clenched in your your breathing is clenched in your teeth, you're desperately trying to you got a thing and you're holding a pole, there's a thing on the nose of your board, and you're getting into this extraordinary place. You know, I'm like, whoa, man, you know, like,
This is perverse.
yeah, you're perverse. How many cameras are going to set up in the bedroom? You know, like, for crying out loud. So I know that makes me sound like an old lion with a broken jaw, but still, there's something to that privacy, that intimacy that I hope I've expressed.
Yeah, I think you're just questioning it. The reasons why one would want to expose to that degree, and it's a valid question. And I don't think many people do question it, because we're just given the media and we've fed it. You know, we spoke about the amount of media being thrown at us,
Oh, yes.
and you spoke about, as a young grom, looking for that barrel, but a lot of them are just getting thrown airs. They're getting told that it's not the barrel anymore; it's
Yeah,
their air.
Sure.
So then we want 360 airs, or you know, and that's what they're being fed. They're consuming this fast food, so to speak, and
Oh, yes.
and you can see it. It's evident in the way in which they serve.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's frantic.
It's frantic, yeah.
And it's nervous and opportunistic and look, I radical surfing. Are you kidding? I love radical surf. It's fantastic, you know. But the nervous, chaotic. I think that's what Mickey Dore called it. He goes, this nervous, chaotic surfing. He's like, Jesus Christ, you know. I'm not running down modern surfing. Heavens no. But there's the connection with the waves, so that you're not in a skate park. You know, you're in the ocean, your ocean. You know, the beauty of that ocean.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to keep that in your heart when you surf.
You mentioned a skate park.
Yes.
Swatch just put on an event which combined a skate park at the Waco.
Oh, I watched all of it. I watch all that. I stay in touch with everything. I watched all that. Hey, man, I'm all for the outrageous.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
you've been pretty outrageous growing up.
so I've been very outrageous, and artificial waves. I remember as a kid, I've always been fascinated with artificial waves. I used to fill Coke cans with sand and go down to the beach and make my own little waves and stuff. I'd make my own reef, you know, about the size of, say, I don't know, a bodyboard or something. And so the artificial wave and the doing the airs and the clackety clack and all this, it's fantastic. And they're pushing it. That cool thing where they took the pier, the floating pier,
Yeah.
and brought it out into surf. I'm going, God, that's fantastic. You know,
A lot of fun.
you know, the fun. Don't forget the fun, you know, but it's, I would really like to spread the philosophy of meaning. so that you're surfing no matter what your pursuit, whether you want to be a world champion or let's say you're not good enough, but you still love surfing to surf every day. I promote finding the meaning of it, the meaning of surfing, because there is a great meaning there that you're not going to find with pickleball. You're not going to find it on that court. You're going to find it in the ocean. So believe in that meaning. And even if you have to keep it very personal to yourself, at least know it and explore it and hopefully read and write about it.
I didn't want to go, it's oftentimes the go-to is like, let's talk about Matt growing up. Let's talk about who you are, because there's a lot of people that are going to be watching who don't know who you are. They don't know you.
Let them find out.
Yeah, exactly. There's enough. It's just, yeah. Have you heard of Google? You just type in Matt George and you'll get a lot of information. So I think it's great to be able to talk about Matt now.
Thank you so
much. Who you are presently and what you represent now. Yes, there is you've left a long trail of beauty in the surf world behind you, a long trail of disrupting, but you can find that on the internet. You know where to go.
Yeah.
Have a look into it. Matt George is is one word that I'm looking for that would best describe you. But as part of the surfing community, you are so well respected. And
thank you.
When people talk about you, there's always like, go and speak to Matt George. If you want to find out information, speak to Matt George. You're like a walking almanac.
Thank you.
Especially here in Southeast Asia. And even before, your friendships with so many legends out there. Who are some of your closest friends that people would know straight off the bat in the surfing community?
It'd be anything. It'd be Griffin, Colapinto. It'd be Cole Houshman, who I really got to know in Western Australia. Then Crosby, Colapinto, Matt Biolis, that whole team. Brad Gerlach. We were
back in Hansen now.
Yeah, we were deeply connected, and so sure. I mean, I could drop a million names.
Yes,
I mean, we all could, but I'm glad you brought that up, because surfing very much is about our personal relationships that we have in life, relationships with other surfers, male surfers, female surfers, child surfers, old oracle surfers. These are very important relationships in your life, and I hope that everybody would take the time to care for them and water them and protect them. Let's listen to each other.
Yeah. I think that it's been an insightful discussion.
I think there's been quite enough. Thank you.
Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure.
It's really my pleasure. I believe in the podcast. I think it's a fantastic venue for surfers to communicate globally. And I wish you the best with yours, and I wish the best with all the surfing podcasts out there.
Thank you.
Let's keep them rolling.
Yep.
Let's keep communicating, and let's everybody find their own meaning in this surfing world.
That's it.